I was going to a basketball game with some students, and they said, "Have you heard?" and so on about Martin. So I remember that very, very vividly.
And when you heard that, what was your reaction?
Oh, gracious! Uh, I don't know if I could pull it up. Uh, uh, well, it was. Well, we have to go on. We can't stop now.
And just so happened, I was cutting Richmond Smiley hair, and the telephone rang in the barber shop, and the lady says, his wife says, is Richmond there? I said, yes, he's in the chair. So tell him Reverend King been killed. And that's when he just almost fell out the chair, and I just grabbed him, because I guess he had a blood just went to his head.
Oh, I was devastated. I mean, you just was in shock, you know. It's like your best friend getting killed, or your daddy or your mama, because he was sort of the daddy in the movement. He was the person that we all looked up to and followed, even though there were disagreements. People were in shock, and I was dispatched to. I was supposed to we're trying to get, Dorothy Hay was trying to get me into Memphis. We couldn't get into Memphis. And so she sent me to Atlanta to let Mrs. King know that she and I and Jean Noble would be coming to the funeral. But it was just, I remember sitting at Pascal's with a lot of the SNCC people, SCLCP, NAACP, all came down to Atlanta and were at Pascal's. And we sat there for hours and hours and hours, and people were saying, Dr. King is not dead, he's coming back. And we sat there all night long. It was hard. It was heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, and we just decided that we had to go on. We had to keep moving on. We had to follow up what we started.
Lord have mercy, I'm trying to remember, but whatever was I? Yeah, I was in Georgia.
Do you
I
remember
was
your
in
reaction?
Atlanta, Georgia. Well, we just all stopped what we were doing and just cried.
I was in the Marine Corps, and I was stationed in Texarkana, Texas, of all places. And I was involved in organizing out there. We were organizing a group called a Texarkana Organization. And we were very active, and boy, it just hit us like a ton of bricks.
I'd moved to Atlanta by then, gotten married, and I had become an Atlanta fireman. And I was in the fire station there. And during those days when the Atlanta Fire Department had just integrated, and you usually had one black per shift. And I was the black on that shift, and we were there looking at the news. And when I think it was Walter Cronkite came on, saying that Dr. King had been killed, I got up and I just walked out. And I didn't have that much verbal interaction with those white guys anyway. I think I let it be known, don't mess with me. This is not a good time to mess with me. And they didn't know anything about my civil rights activities. All they knew that I was just a big, burly, black dude. And I just said, don't mess with me. I used a few other choice words. And for about 3 days, everybody tiptoed around me.
I was in the dormitory, and some of the young men on the campus came in and let us know that Dr. King had been shot and killed. And they said as it was in the evening, not dark yet, dusk, maybe right before dusk, dark, but they said, we're afraid that things may begin to get a little difficult outside. We're asking all of the women to stay inside. And then when it got dark, they came back and said, we'd like for everybody to just sit in the hall together. So we all sat on the floor. We lined the halls. The women just sat on the floor. and lined the halls, and they sort of walked around the dorms and protected the dorms and things, and just make sure, you know, that no one was there that should not have been there.
What was your reaction though when you heard?
You know, I was frightened all over again.
I was in college. I don't remember which class I was in, probably a chemistry lab or something. But when I got the news, it was devastating because this was a person whom I had the ultimate respect for and love for. And to be gunned down, that was awful. Yeah. And I did go to Atlanta to the funeral march, and it was just a sad time.
What was the funeral march like when you were there in the midst of it? I mean,
It was huge, and I looked at the throngs of people who were also sad that something like that could happen to someone who had given so much, and to have his life taken away from him and from his family and from all of us. It was just a very hard thing.
My dad and I was talking about Dr. King, and it came across the air that Dr. King had been killed.
what was your reaction when you heard that?
Of course, as everybody else in the United States, I was shocked. I could not believe my ears. And I thought about his children, his widow, and then I thought about the movement.
I remember vividly. I'll never forget coming from Brown's Chapel Church because I was in a Girl Scout meeting. And when I had come to my door, and as I opened the door, all of the attention my parents and my other siblings who were there were to the TV. And back then we had the black and white TVs. And then as I opened the door, they all turned to me with sad faces. And even before I can ask what was wrong, something came over the TV that said Dr. King had been shot and killed in Memphis. And I just fell down to my knees. And of course my parents and siblings came to comfort me.
Well, I thought that it was a great loss because I felt that his presence really inspired a lot of great things that happened for the good of all people. And he being gone, it means that that inspiration from him, was lost. But there were others who were going to take up the banner and then move forward regardless of the consequences.
I was on the 9th floor in the Old Claridge building, Old Claridge Hotel, with 9 city council persons. It takes 9 city council persons to override the mayor's veto. And I was in that room with those 9 city council persons, and we agreed that day, at the very hour that he was assassinated, to grant to the union full approval of their request for union recognition, dues check-off, improvement of working condition, increase in salary, and all of the other things that goes along with it. And we were celebrating it there in the room for about 20 or 30 minutes, and we got a call from one of the council person's wife who was watching TV, and she called and said to us, Martin had just got shot. I went in an orbit because I admired and respected King over the years, and from a churchman as a part of our church convention, and then after hearing him in '63 in that civil rights movement, in the March on Washington, he became my idol. And I just went off an orbit. I said, they've killed my man. And they tried to calm me down and said, wait, Jim, until he gets to the hospital and let's see what happens. And sure enough, when he got to the hospital, it was now dead or on arrival.
I was, as I recall it, I was at home. I had come home, actually, and my mom and dad told me that Dr. King had been killed. And it was just devastating, really, in a way. I mean, but it wasn't, I had experienced that before in the sense that John Kennedy was killed a few years earlier. Now, and that was, I guess, shocking in the sense that I never expected anything like that to happen. I guess I was young enough, and it was an event that was so singular in my life that it was totally unexpected. When Dr. King died or was killed, I was devastated, but I had been through that before as far as the Kennedy assassination. So, you know, again, I did feel devastated that there was a hope that seemed like it had been thwarted to some degree. So those are my feelings.
When Dr. King was shot in Memphis, I was living in St. Louis, Missouri, and I heard the news come over the television about his being shot, and then a few minutes later that he actually had been killed. It was the most devastating news that I'd heard in my life because I just felt that I lost hope, you know, at that moment. That if a man of peace, of nonviolence could be shot down, then what did that mean for the rest of us as black people here in America?
The night King was killed, my boss always used to take me home. At this time, my mother had remarried, and we lived at 1501 Whitmore, which is off Alsea Road. And he was so afraid, usually he would take me home, but he was so afraid because what happened, the violence came about so quick that he dropped me off at the corner of Airways and Ketchum. And I walked down Alsea to Sparks, made that right, went up 2 blocks to Whitmore, I was at home.
I felt bad. I was sad that he came to Memphis to help the sanitation department, and then he got killed. You know, that hurt you, but it hurt you. For somebody come to help you and they get killed, that you automatically sad.
My kitchen was in the front of our house, and I had the television on. I was fixing dinner, and the news broke into an announcement, and they said that Dr. King had been shot.
What did you do?
I was devastated. Devastated. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I had been to the funeral of Medgar Evers in Mississippi, I don't know, 2 years before, and that was horrible. You know, the head of the NAACP in Mississippi assassinated. Two years before, and I just couldn't believe it. It was a shock. And I did go to Atlanta for his funeral, and I participated in the march that Coretta Scott King led here in Memphis afterwards.
How did people respond? What did the city
They were
feel
just
like?
quiet. I mean, it was a true dirge, a mournful march.
Do you think that the assassination of Martin Luther King here in Memphis has changed the way that people view Memphis?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. I think this is known as the city where Martin Luther King was assassinated.